wear my shirt or I wear my sweatshirt? Or do you care?
So many options.
My sweatshirt is cool, but it's a little big.
Because it has the heart that's broken?
Yeah. Is this going to be part of the bloopers?
Probably. Hello and welcome again to another episode of PS Make Me Famous. Today I'm here with my very good friend Edon Small, and first of all, did I say your name right? Edon?
No, Edon.
Edon. To this day.
You said Edon.
Edon. I always like to go soft on the E. Okay, let me try again.
Is this going to be part of the interview?
Edon. It's already recording, yeah. Hello and welcome to another episode of PS Make Me Famous. I'm here with my good friend Edon Small. He is in California, Los Angeles at this time. He is an information designer, therapist, and attorney, and he graduated with a BA in psychology from UCLA, then received his JD from UC Davis's King Hall, and his work focused on mental health rights and advocacy. And after being disillusioned with the legal practice, he began dabbling in meditation, not mediation.
You got it right. Mediation. No, you got it right.
Mediation, not yeah. Both. And got his master's in counseling with an MFT Specialization. Edon also has a thriving Zen practice. He is a Dharma teacher in training in the Kwan School of Zen. I think I did it right that time. Kwan School of Zen, and completed a 30-day silent meditation retreat in 2017, which is crazy, and we're going to talk about that. Over the past 5 years, he's been actively developing his own model of psychology that blends Buddhist philosophy and his own insights into psychology and narrative, which is so cool. He now works primarily as a designer, but offers free therapy to those who need it, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I'm so excited to have you on the show. Bam! That was an introduction. Bam!
Yeah. The 20th time's the try, it's the charm, as they always say.
Yeah, practice makes perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start from, I want to go into your childhood. Can we go from the very beginning?
Sure.
Okay, so let's start from, what did you want to be when you were younger?
I wanted to be a doctor. And I think the reason why is because I had a doctor, a pediatrician. And I think every time I said, I want to be a pediatrician, my parents probably lit up and were like, oh, good, he's going to be a Jewish pediatrician. Perfect. That's what I wanted to be. And then I wanted to be an astrophysicist, like a cosmologist, studying like a Stephen Hawking type guy.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So when was your first introduction into the world of Buddhism or meditation?
Buddhism, I've always been interested in religion, and at some point I picked up a very, very popular Zen book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And then in my last year of college, I tried magic mushrooms, Psilocybin, and had a very, very intense sort of open experience and had no idea how to really make sense of it. And I was browsing in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and found this one passage. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's exactly what I experienced. Because I had read all these, I have this book on psychedelic experiences and was reading other people's stuff, but nothing really captured it. And this Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, this one random paragraph, I was just like, oh, that's it. That's totally it. And ever since then, I was sort of hooked, I would say.
Do you remember what that paragraph was?
It was something about reality becoming very vivid, because on that trip, everything sort of just came alive. It felt like everything was really there in ways that you don't really notice it. And I've had experiences like that through meditation since then, but it's taken quite a long time. So in a way, it's sort of been like a long path back to where I kind of started. Mm-hmm. Sort of finding my way back, sort of like a Hansel and Gretel story, but with a mystical edge.
Oof. I like that little wink at the end. It was like for the ladies. So let's go to your psilocybin experience, because I'm actually going to be talking to a guy who utilizes that in PTSD and a bunch of stuff in the States as well. how did you decide, who introduced you to psilocybin, and were you alone when you took it, with a group of people? Where were you?
Probably one of my stoner roommates recommended it. I did have friends who were sort of interested in it. I don't remember how much we took, but this is, so I was like 21, 22 at the time, and we kind of wandered onto UCLA campus. The first thing I noticed, I can tell you, I'll give you a couple highlights.
Okay, I'm ready.
First thing I remember noticing is that the lights on the street lights were very vivid and very bright, and they had halos around them a little bit. And I remember realizing I had incisors, and I was like, oh, I'm like an animal. I'm like, and you don't really think of yourself as an animal. You think of yourself as a human. But I was like, oh, I'm an animal. We're all animals. And it became a theme of the rest of the night, because one of the themes was, this is how I understand it now, sort of post-Buddhist kind of digestion and philosophy. We have a whole layer that we sort of superimpose on our reality, and that layer is all of our thinking. Our thinking and our perception gets fused.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really sort of, what we experience on the inside is sort of a mixture of what we're seeing and what we think we're seeing, or what we think about that. So that even has to do with like labels and words and associations. So it comes up in narrative theory, maybe we'll talk about that later. When you look at your partner or your spouse, you're not just seeing your spouse in that moment, you're seeing all your associations with that person as well. And when you think about yourself, you see all those associations. So on mushrooms, in that experience, all those associations kind of just, and it happens on meditation too, in peak experiences. And when you look at, even when you think about people, and the whole idea of this Zen mind, beginner's mind, is the beginner's mind doesn't have all these associations. So if you sort of undo all those associations, you get back to this beginner's mind, which is like your first time seeing something. So if you were an alien, coming down on planet Earth, and you saw people, you wouldn't see humans, you wouldn't see human beings, you would see animals. And that's sort of what I saw that first time. And I was just so amused looking at these people who were walking upright, just walking on their hind legs, balancing perfectly, wearing clothes, and super social. Those are the three things that stood out the most. And that was just, that was just one part of a very interesting experience, but that was sort of one of the big themes. Humans are animals, and it started with that little, oh yeah, I'm an animal too.
That's amazing. How long was your trip?
Probably like 4 or 5 hours.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more. Probably about 4 or 5 hours in the beginning.
That's wild.
Yeah. And I ended up, so my roommates and I kind of walked onto UCLA campus, and then within probably about an hour or so, I was like, oh, I went into this like very deep inner sort of voyage, or inner like quest, and metabolized a lot of my issues in that moment. And honestly, I don't remember it, and I kind of wish I did, but I remember thinking a lot about my father, thinking about my identity, thinking about who I was. And I came out of that just very, very calm and open. And I was alone at that point. And I remember I saw a play, these kids were putting on a play that was very amusing. And my impulse to help other people was sort of very like nurtured, which is a lot of what Buddhists talk about too. It was sort of cultivated in that moment, kind of blossomed. So it was just a desire to like really be together, to sort of be in harmony with everything, and to let other things also help other things stay in harmony or come into harmony. So they're not fighting, they're not resisting, they're just sort of like kind of easygoing.
I love that. So psilocybin kind of changed your life.
It did, yeah. It put it. If it wasn't for that, I probably would be a miserable lawyer right now. So I still ended up following some of that
Do you
path.
think a lot of people who are lawyers missed out on the psilocybin of their lives? Like if they did that psilocybin, nobody would go to law.
I mean, it's you know what? It's possible because in law practice, and the reason I didn't like law practice is
Mhm.
because you're constantly fighting, and there are probably exceptions to this, but most of it is sort of just at least on the at least on the litigation side. There's another part of law that's transactional, which is making contracts and negotiating deals and stuff, which I imagine it also has quite a bit of adversarial. Yeah, exactly. But just like in litigation, you're just constantly fighting. It's like a bad relationship. It's just fighting, fighting, fighting. You did this, you did this, you did this, blaming, blaming. It's exactly like a bad relationship.
Maybe there should be like a retreat for lawyers called Save Our Lawyers, and they get the psilocybin, and then they could change their new direction because they like are reintroduced to who they really are and want to be. We could save the lawyers. There should be a foundation.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really interesting idea.
Melinda Gates is available. I mean, she could probably help us with
She'd probably be involved in Save the CEOs, but yeah.
that. So that's really cool because I feel like I've spoken to a few people who've mentioned psilocybin
Mm.
um, to me this year, and especially because my husband's now getting into the psilocybin space. It's been amazing because really everyone who said they've had that first experience really completely changed them and their course path, and how they view life, and it's like the most intense therapy you can ever do.
Yeah, yeah. It 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 shows you there's a lot to unpack with any kind of like psychedelic experience, because it kind of just takes you out of your normal reality that you take as reality. That's the thing, is like I take my experience as, oh, this is the experience, that this is it. But it shows you, no, this is not it. This is just sort of, this is an option. And it's not so easy to choose options, but there are options out there, and that you can kind of start to tweak things, move some levers up and down to change your overall experience, which is sort of the essence of psychotherapy as well, a little bit. But
Mhm. Do you recommend if someone's going to try psilocybin for the first time to do it solo or with a group of people?
for people, yeah,
People,
yeah.
okay. That's really cool. So the yogis, have they ever done psilocybin? Is that embedded in their culture in any way? Like I heard DMT is something that yogis do. Is there?
So I'm not like heavy. So the community that I sort of participate in is not made of yogis. It's more Zen practitioners. The difference being that I think yogis practice yoga, Zen practitioners practice, as you guessed it, Zen. Um, um, I know that there are a lot of stories of people who got interested in Zen or got interested in Eastern philosophy via drugs or via some sort of mystical spiritual experience.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I did obviously. One of the senior monks in my school had a similar story where he tried acid in I don't know, in his 20s, and then became a senior, devoted his entire life to this practice. Sam Harris is kind of an interesting thinker, who talks a lot about Eastern philosophy and waking up. He wrote a book called Waking Up, and he got interested in Zen, in Eastern philosophy through ecstasy, I think,
Mhm.
back in the day. So I think it's Alan Watts, who's a writer who I love, who kind of made a big influence on my life, says, once you get the message, hang up the phone. That's his sort of approach to psychedelics. So don't abuse it, but like once you get it, put it down. So
Oh
I
my
think,
gosh, like literally we can change the world with psilocybin.
yeah,
Like I feel like it's like almost like a rites of passage. It's like you finish university before you go to university, like in a safe place, because they have psilocybin therapy now.
yeah,
You have it in a controlled situation to really kind of evoke who you are, not who you've been told you are, or like you said, all those influences that really shape your sense of self.
would you try it?
I can't wait. I really need to, and I don't want my children around because I don't know what that's going to be like. Is there a
Yeah,
sparkle on me? Do you see the sparkle?
yeah, I do.
There's sparkles all over. Um, I really want to, so I'll let you know when I do that and the experience. I really think I'll come out like as a completely different person. I really think I could use it.
Yeah. Um,
I think
I don't know. I don't know a ton about the therapy. I know that they're experimenting with it for, I think, yeah, PTSD and maybe depression too, from what I remember. But I don't know how that therapy goes. I'd be interested in learning about it.
I'll put you
Um,
in touch with the guy I'm interviewing next. He's out of somewhere in the States, Midwest States, but he's doing that already. So I'll put you in touch with him.
cool.
Yeah, he's really, really cool. So what's a book you'd really recommend to people that they should read to feel more awakened, or a book that you would read more than once? Because it's just every time you read it, it's like, whoa, another gem.
The book that for sure. I mean, it's an easy answer. The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts. When I read that in college,
Uh-huh.
it it really it was one of a few books that really changed the way that I see the world and see myself. I'll
Mm.
tell you the other two books too.
Yeah, please.
He basically kind of goes through. So Alan Watts was he was a Buddhist, but really Zen practitioner who in I think the 50s or 60s maybe. I know he was lecturing a lot in the 60s. Got really interested in Zen and or maybe in the 70s too. Got really interested in Zen and opened up his Zen center at 18 years old and like had some really big experiences and then went on to lecture for the rest of his basically the rest of his life. He had some interesting sort of like excursions on that path, but he was just sort of like he called himself a spiritual entertainer, which is an
What was his awakening moment? What did he do that kind of
you know what? That's a good question. I don't know what his moment was, but I remember he was 18 years old when he first had some big experiences.
it's very
So
cool.
his book changed like the way that I see a lot of things. The other one is Desmond Morris, The Naked Ape, where he just talks about how people are animals, and he shows you the relationship between the things that we do and the things that animals do. And once you read that, it's just mind blowing. And then the third one is Games People Play by Eric Byrne, um, who is a psychologist who developed something called transactional analysis, TA, which is a form of, it's basically like a psychotherapy. It's a sort of school of psychology. You can kind of think of it, school of psychotherapy, maybe. Um, there was one there was one part of the book that really opened my eyes though. It's so simple, but he has an idea that he calls strokes. So he says that when mothers and their babies, when mothers are tending to their babies, they give them strokes to make them feel good, right? To soothe them and give them a warm, fuzzy feeling. That's what he calls it, warm fuzzies. But yeah, his thesis is that when we get older, we continue to sort of look for these fuzzy feelings, these warm, fuzzy strokes. So when we want like people to make us feel good, or when we give that feeling to others, we want them to just kind of feel warm and fuzzy. So he talks about how that can be dangerous and that can be destructive, and how we can sort of play these transactional games, these
Mm.
sort of verbal games, to elicit those strokes from people, to get them to say, oh, you're it's so hard for you, but you're doing such a great job, or oh, I feel so bad for you, things are so hard, or you know, it's okay if you don't succeed, or it's okay if you don't try, as long as you know. So it's a really interesting concept, and it's sort of gotten a lot of mileage out of it, especially when I was younger. I got a lot of mileage out of it.
Hmm. Where do you see yourself in 10 years from now? Well, that's way fast because I feel like I've progressed this too quickly. But I guess I do want to see like what is the dream? What's your dream?
I don't even know what I'm doing tonight. Um, what am I in 10 years, in 5 years?
Like
I
what's the
would
dream? Like what's the dream? Like
share.
where do you see yourself in 10 years? That's the dream.
The dream would be doing psychotherapy, having a small sort of like group where we would sort of do therapy and sort of have workshops in a way that wasn't like culty or wasn't like I don't know, not too culty, but I would love to like train people to kind of learn how to use narrative theory and narrative therapy and have people sort of work on other people and learn how to use it and sort of grow it. Almost like in sort of workshops. I've been to some of these workshops though, and they can get a little bit like salesy, and I don't want it. I don't want it to be salesy. There are some groups like that, and the ideas are good, but the implementation, not my favorite. So I'd want to stay away from that. But that would be a dream.
Okay, and how many people are in this group?
24, 25.
Love it. And what would the name be?
Narrative theory group.
Cool. Okay. So let's talk about this 30-day silent retreat you did. That's crazy. That's insane. I can't be quiet for 2 minutes. Well, I did actually today.
Okay, sorry, wait. I had to text my dad because we have a Mother's Day thing.
Tell him I say hey.
Okay, but you can edit this out or no?
We'll see how I feel.
I'm just not gonna.
I just flow. I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay.
30-day retreat in Cumberland, Rhode Island, Zen retreat.
And how old are you when you did it? How old are you?
3 years ago.
Oh, recent.
It was started every morning, I think at 4:45, and it went to about 9:20 at night. It was a long day. There's a lot to talk about. There's some weird. You want to hear the weird, crazy stories?
Yeah, I'm turning this light off, and yes, I do. There you
go. So I get there. It's tough. Like, you know, you have about a 3 hours of break throughout the whole day, split into like I think 2 pieces or so. But otherwise it's either walking, sitting, or chanting meditation the entire day. The second day, my mind was just like running. And now I see it as running. Back at the time, I thought it was like some sort of important experience or something, although it sort of turned into an important experience. So this is like day 2 or 3, which is crazy thinking about this. But I started sort of like thinking about my inner child a lot, which is a construct. I don't think there's a real inner child, but it's a construct of your personality. It's like a little like, I don't know, division of your personality, you could say. Not a real division, but you can create a division there. And I started having a dialogue with that person and started having a little conversation with that person. And it was interesting because the person was responding, and again, it's me, but the responses were all in Hebrew, which is kind of interesting for the people who don't know. Like, I do speak Hebrew, and I spoke Hebrew when I was young, especially. So we're having this dialogue, and like, it's like getting emotional a little bit. And I'm just sitting on the cushion with these other like 20 people or so, just in silence. And I remember starting to ask, like, I was like viewing this person as very good, and just very pure, and it made me a little sad. And then the person said back to me in Hebrew, "Ata ani," which, if you speak Hebrew, it means "I am you." And I started crying on the cushion, and I started crying hard. Tears are like running down my face because I'm just sort of like experiencing this beautiful moment of reconciliation. Me thinking that, like, I have so much work, like I've strayed so far from the sort of purity that you see in your children, I'm sure, that I see in my nephew. There's just this absolute purity. And it's easy to feel impure as you get older and you become sort of lost and you become so, I don't know, stuck in like all the judgments and goals and all this shit. And I was just crying, tears of like beauty and joy and sadness all at once. And I left the room. So there was they hit something called the chugpi, which means meditation session is over after a half an hour. And I went down to my room and I just started crying. And this is the hardest, I've had a couple hard cries in my life, probably about 3 or 4. This was the hardest one, I think, like wailing, like somebody had just died. I was crying into my pillow because I didn't want to make noise. And I get back upstairs and I'm sorry, I've calmed down a little bit. And I asked I was going to ask, so I got back into the walking meditation and I was going to ask the head Dharma teacher if I could have a few minutes to just process this, right? And he wasn't in the room, he was in his room, and we're walking, and I want to say, okay, so there's another part of the story that's kind of funny, and I need to tell you this so you can understand. So when I was like a kid, or like maybe in college, there were these things called soundboards where people would do prank calls using chopped up snippets of movies, and there was an Arnold Schwarzenegger prank call, and they used like little chopped up bits of his movies. And one of the things that they would put, there was like a whole bunch of things. They would be like, "How are you? Yes, yes, yes." And my brothers and I got really good at doing it. And one was from like I think True Lies. I think that was his, where he would go, "Jamie, please," like Jamie, because he was Jamie Lee Curtis was in the movie, and I guess go, "Jamie, please." Now the name, so this is just something that happened, and it was very funny when we were younger, and people would do prank calls with these and just mess with people. So the head Dharma teacher at that retreat was named Jamie. So I'm walking around doing walking meditation. I'm like, what am I going to say to him? What am I going to say to him? And I'm just going to be like, oh, I'm going to say, "Jamie, please." And I started laughing because it reminded me of this thing. So I was like, oh my God, I start laughing really hard. So I have to check myself out because I'm like, I'm not going to bother everybody during walking meditation. So I go back to his room and I knock on the door and I'm giggling so hard I could not catch my breath. So the hardest cry is followed by probably the hardest laugh I've ever laughed, and I cannot stop giggling. And he's like, "Are you okay?" I could not say it, and I finally was able to like get it together after a while. And he being the senior Dharma teacher, or the head Dharma teacher, was just totally cool, totally understanding. And we talked about it, and it was funny because he also like was a little bit of a bodybuilder, like a light bodybuilder. As we were leaving, we kind of talked it out, and I went back to the room, and he's like, "Just so you know, my wife got me a T-shirt for me for fun for my birthday that said, 'Come with me if you want to lift,'" which is cute. I don't know if you get it. All right.
No, I get it because Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, instead of live, the line is live from Terminator. So it's just interesting. I actually ended up, so a couple of years before this, I wrote my thesis for my master's on the role of humor and catharsis, because they're related. Every time I've had therapy, every time somebody else, I've given therapy to people and they've had like a big emotional moment, it's always been, it always sort of gets filled with like laughter and joy and levity. So I wrote about that in my thesis, but it's just funny. I just put that together right now as telling you the story. It was the hardest cry followed by the hardest laugh I've ever had. And this is day 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll tell you, do you want to hear the one other weird story about this? Because
I do want to hear it, but I'm also wondering, like, is it that you're kind of unblocking all these emotions? Like,
Yeah. I,
It was just like you didn't even feel anymore. I feel you lost knowing what is real and what to feel, and then it just kind of all kind of
you mean the humor part or the crying?
everything. You had like absolute, this sadness and then this absolute joy, and I'm just wondering if it was just because all your emotions were just locked. I don't think you were feeling for a few years. I'm just wondering if that's kind of like it was like a detox of allowing that channel that was stuck to flow.
Yeah, I wouldn't say wasn't feeling for a few years. That sounds a little extreme, but I would say that there was like, it felt like a surge of self-love, like a tsunami of self-love.
Mm.
And after that, I think when you let go, when you think about what laughter is, this is part of the paper, I think. Like when you think about what laughter is, it's a tensing and a letting go, and a tensing and a letting go.
Mm.
And that crying was a massive letting go, a massive, massive letting go. So I think that just sort of primes you a little bit for laughter. It's sort of, I don't know. And then it's probably also like the just the relief of letting go of a lot of that kind of pain
Mm.
that you have. It just makes you feel good, you know.
Okay, tell me the third one.
So the spooky part is that later that night, um, that same night, I actually ended up staying up all night, or for most of the night, laughing in my bed like a crazy person, because I had
Sometimes
this
the crazy
comedy,
ones are the most sane.
I had this comedy routine that I was writing in my head, and it was so pure. It was like Bill Cosby before he turned into a terrible person. But his humor was very like lighthearted and innocent, and it was just like a comedy routine that I was writing in my head the entire night. And my roommate probably thought it was fucking nuts. But I was just up there giggling and giggling the whole like for hours on end. Um, um, but earlier that night, something weird happened where I'm like a weirdo, I'm a weirdo, and like sometimes I go into meetings, and I've heard every time I tell this to people, they say, "Oh, I do that too." Sometimes I go into meetings and I'm like, "Okay, if anybody is psychic in this meeting, cough right now." Maybe I'm the only one who
That's
does this.
amazing.
So, and nobody coughs always, and I'm just like, yeah, exactly. So I was like playing a game with myself later that night, and I remember it was nighttime, and I was looking at the reflection of the Buddha statue behind me that has a light on top of it, right? So, and this place was built in the 70s, I believe. So it's got these massive like orbs of light, like these gigantic, like it looks very 70s, but like these huge like lights, and they're really bright, and they're like orbs all over the room. So anyway, so I'm sitting there, it's like probably the last session, and I'm like, hey, the teacher from our school was named Zen Master Sung San, but people would call him Sung Sinim. So who were like close to him. So I was like, hey, Sung Sinim, if you could hear me,
Wink a dink.
give me a little sign. How about a little sign? A little
Uh-huh.
sign to you. So I'm like sitting there, and I see the light flicker on top of this Buddha thing, and I'm like, nah, no, can't be.
Tanzaning.
So I go back to meditating, and about 5 seconds later, all the lights in the Dharma room, it was dark,
Stop.
all go on full blast. Every single one. The light, it's just everyone's like looking around. What the hell is going on? All the lights on full blast. It never happened again on the retreat. It was the only time it happened the entire retreat. It was just there's some weird stuff going on. So I don't know. I don't know what it just
Well, don't
tell
you just think it's just a matter of, we're just like a layer away from, like, we don't have time to see everything that there is. We just have the perception of what there is. So what's to say that you can't make things happen? I don't know. Just saying.
honestly, I have no idea. I
Okay.
have I have no idea how to interpret it. I just think like it gives me a little comfort thinking that there's a little bit of magic out
I
there.
love that. I love that. I think there's a lot of magic.
Yeah.
Okay, so would you recommend this? Who would you recommend this kind of retreat to? Because 30 days to not talk, like what was the first word you said out of your mouth kind of out of 30?
You talk to teachers, so
Yeah.
you're not talking at all, but it's mostly silent. So when you talk to teachers like 3 times a week. So
Okay.
it's not so bad. But I will say that the first time I actually had a normal conversation with somebody at the end of the retreat was this guy, this random guy who was not even part of the retreat. I was just waiting for an Uber, and I remember talking to him, and I was like I remember feeling like I was going to cry. You just felt so vulnerable, in not a bad way, but just so fragile that I remember just talking to him about like going home in the retreat, and I was like, I'm sorry, I feel like I have to cry a little bit. And part of that vulnerability is you're not embarrassed about being vulnerable. I think that's kind of like a feature of vulnerability. So I remember he's like, oh, that's okay. He was just very nice too. He lived at the Zen Center. So it was just really nice. Later that day, I remember like having a really nice conversation with this random cyclist at this cafe that I went to eat at, and then I got a ride to a museum with this really nice couple, and we ended up talking. And then I went to this art store, and just like it was just good energy. It was really good energy everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back home, and I was in just starting a relationship with somebody, and I feel like we sort of progressed about 6 months in 3 weeks. It was just
Wow.
really, really open-hearted, vulnerable. We didn't end up staying together, but because some of that energy sort of wears off. But like it was intensely vulnerable, honest, not like vulnerable like I'm gonna cry all the time, right?
No.
Vulnerable, just like I can share what I'm really feeling and experiencing, and I'm not embarrassed about it. And I can have a difficult conversation if I need to. And there was a lot of sort of compassion, I would say, sort of.
Yeah.
It depends on what you think about when you hear the word compassion, but there was just a sort of like an urge to help people, I'll say.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
It's
it was
amazing.
nice.
I do think a lot of people walk around very scared to show vulnerability. I think now people are more open to it, showing that nothing's really perfect, except Instagram's like the worst. But um, I think if more people were able to be vulnerable, relationships would progress faster. But we're always trying to put this front of, I got this all down, I have this all together, this is what I want you to see of me. But it's like, hello, we're all in this together.
I think another thing that kind of makes that a little tricky is that it's scary to sort of reveal some things because it can be a threat to the relationship, or at least the other person can view that as like a sign that things are really not okay, and that maybe everything needs to fall apart when it might not need to. And maybe sometimes it does.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it makes it hard to share when the consequence of sharing could be not what you want or intend.
Right. But then I just be like, go with the flow because everything happens how it's supposed to happen. But then, yeah, it depends what your philosophy. Let's talk about your philosophy, Edon.
Let's talk about your philosophy.
No, this is all about you for once. It's all about you. What is your what is a quote you live by?
I don't have one.
Well, just pick one. Can you okay, well, what are
Don't live your life by a single quote.
okay, that's a good one.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
I
Paid sponsorship right here.
I don't I don't I don't know. I can't. I honestly couldn't think of it.
Is there someone you look up to? God, you're just a blank slate today. Give me some.
Um, but this is not the way that I think. That's why none of this is none of like I don't have like is there somebody I look up to? Yeah, I would say there are people I look up to.
I don't think that
I
hard.
don't know. The people I look up to, I think, are people who sort of like forge their own path
Mm-hmm.
in life and aren't like they don't have like cliche lives. They've taken risks. You know, I think I only see the ones that are successful because there are probably some that are unsuccessful, I would imagine. But the ones that are successful will also happen to have both a lot of talent and a lot of perseverance, and I look up to that.
Okay, what are 3 things that excite you about life?
None of these questions. Three things that excite me about life. I don't
What
really.
makes you happy?
What I like to drum. I like to like live performance. I like to like excite, make people happy. I like having a drink, having a cocktail at a bar, and making some good jokes. Um, and I don't know. I like good food actually.
I like good
I
food.
like tasty food. I like analyzing food a little bit sometimes.
Me too.
Fun to like guess what ingredients.
Yes.
I like to play a game where I have a friend who's a chef, and I always like to ask her how she would improve or change a dish or fun. I think it's very interesting.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm
Yeah.
talking to well, next Sunday I'm airing Jessie King's interview, and she's a Red Seal chef, and she's owned a few restaurants here in Calgary, like really amazing ones. And we talk about like her best meal ever, and like how like she has this certain part in her mouth where she can actually like think of a flavor and actually taste it, and she could do the pairing in her mouth.
Oh, that's crazy.
You're gonna love that one. I'll send it to you when it's like airing. But um I feel like you're a person who'd rather like you just love making human connections and meet like new people, whatever. You already know this. I don't know why I'm saying this.
What's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote: when one door closes, another one opens.
Oh,
I'm wearing pajamas.
they match. Okay, cool.
Any other questions you have for me?
Um,
I haven't
yeah.
been well.
Would you, so you would try much.
Yes, and I would like to try it sooner than later. Yes, I just don't know. Like how, you can make it yourself, but I think I need to go the legal route. Is it even legal yet? I don't know.
I don't think so, but I would encourage you to do it outside and with people that you love.
Yeah, and I also think you doing this retreat to help save the souls of people through the power of that magic mushroom. They don't call it magic for nothing. Could be very interesting.
You asked me before who would I recommend the retreat to. I would say people who have sat. I mean, you don't have to sit all 30 days. You can choose how long you want to sit. But for people who have maybe practiced for like it depends on you, it depends on your practice, but like anybody who's practiced for like 2 years or more who can sit for like more than 3 hours if they really
Ugh.
need to. Yeah, but you do that during a retreat. So if you go to some retreats and you want to sort of see like one of the things that happens on a retreat, even on a 1 day retreat, is like you can really still your mind. You can really change your focus. And I always feel like even after a 1 day retreat, I feel fantastic. Like for the next 2 days, like even in my meetings with other like at work, my meetings just are a lot lighter. People are laughing more, like my ability to sort of take criticism changes, which I don't love, but like, it's easier to not take things personally. So it really changes those sort of those narratives that I think we have about ourselves, but we have it under the surface. So narrative theory, we call it dehydrated narratives because you can sort of hydrate them and expand them, but they're sort of automatically being triggered. So that starts to really change and kind of get rewired when you start to sort of manage your energy differently in a retreat. So if after 1 day of retreat or even a half day, you feel pretty damn good for about a day or two, imagine what it's like after a month.
Wow. How
Um,
often do you do these retreats?
about once a month.
Wow, you do.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
We have
amazing.
we have them at the Zen Center. I'm happy to send you a link too. You
Yeah.
can leave it at the yeah, I'll send a link to our website.
Yeah. That's amazing. So you're actually studying to be a teacher in
Yeah,
Dharma practice.
yeah.
How long is training?
2 years. and it took 2 years to get to take the vows to become it's about 4 years in total.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And basically you're integrating that practice with the therapy because you have a master's or a doctorate in psychology.
I have a master's, but yeah, I'm trying to. So I mean, one of the sort of like complaints I had about therapy when we were doing it is um, I've complaints about everything, but one of my complaints about psychotherapy is like the goals are left really open to the practitioner. It didn't seem like there were any goals in psychotherapy. It was sort of just whatever the person who came in wanted. Um, and like I kind of like I can respect the spirit of that, but I also think that a lot of people may not really have like a full menu of sort of experiences to choose from. You know, some people only like know a little bit, and they don't really know like what it looks like and to have your life in balance, or like to really open your relationships up, or to change your relationship to yourself. It's just not part of their vocabulary yet. And I think you can assume that if they did have that as part of their vocabulary, their emotional vocabulary, they'd probably want that. And it's a big if, but it's an important if, because if you're right about that, you can really guide people to really change their life. If you only kind of start with what they want, you're sort of limited, I think. So the idea, one of the ideas behind narrative theory is that, you know, my frustration with psychology not having a sort of firm idea of what it means to be a healthy person. And I think a lot of it also sort of gets stuck with like, it kind of gets fused with what's happening, what's considered normal at the time, which is not always a good, I mean, it doesn't, just because you're normal, just because you're average doesn't mean you're healthy, right? So I kind of look to Eastern philosophy and Zen to sort of fill out that part of my philosophy or approach. So if people come to me, you know, I'm always sort of looking, like in therapy, I'm always kind of thinking, what is this person, what's kind of going on with them from my perspective, and how do we bring them back into harmony? How do we sort of, what are the components, what do they need? So they might come in and say like, I just want to make more at work. And like, you know, if you want to just like make more money at work, then you can go maybe talk to another therapist if you want, but that's not what I'm going to help you with. I'm going to help you kind of maybe understand what is sort of going on, what are the big pieces, what are the big pictures, and how do we find a way to sort of bring you into harmony. And a lot of that is really sort of like, it's Zen practice, and you can translate some of Zen practice into like English and Western psychology. I think some of it is sort of made its way in with positive psychology that has a lot of emphasis on authenticity. So there are sort of openings to it, but at the end of the day, I think we kind of need to quiet our mind, examine things, look at and learn how to sort of stop thinking for a little while and just experience reality directly as much as possible, because it changes your perspective of things, and it can also sort of like flush out some of those psychological toxins. You know,
How often do you think people should meditate a day? How many minutes a day?
Whatever you can. I would say like if you can aim for about 20 minutes a day, it's a good start. If you can find a way, I think, to integrate it into other parts of your life. So it's not just when you're sitting down, but like if you're taking a walk, if you're talking with people, sometimes if you can find a way to sort of like come back to stillness, it's helpful. I like to do it when I'm in transit, when I'm taking walks.
Yes, I was just gonna say.
That is.
Is there a company called Walk with a Therapist? Because that sounds way more my style.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like I don't want to sit and like look at someone and be like, hey, like I want to walk, because when you walk, you're not like overthink, you're kind of in a flow. So I
Yeah.
feel like it's more organic. Is there a company? Because I would love to walk with Edon. Walk with Edon.
I don't know if there's a company, but I know that some therapists will do that for sure.
Yeah.
And if you go to therapy, you should tell your therapist, I want to walk. I don't want to sit in a very serious room. It's very serious therapy.
It's very serious, and you're like, okay, this is how I have to sit. And like, don't judge. Like, are you looking at my IQs? It's like, it's too much. I don't know.
A lot. That's a lot.
It's too much. Can we end with like what the meaning of Om is, and then a cool chant? Because I know you're like so good at chanting.
Oh, so we don't chant Om.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of Om?
Is it a vibration only? Om. It's just a vibration, a frequency.
Yeah, I think in like in the, I don't know, in the mythology, Om is supposed to be the sound that creates the whole world.
That makes sense, because when you're on an airplane, this calms me down.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really chant Om.
Can you do your gong chong hung?
We do chant. Yeah, we have some. It's like a Proto-Korean Chinese language of our chanting. Yeah.
Can we end with that? Like maybe like only 30 seconds of it.
Sure.
You need the drum?
No, I don't have a drum. Let me think about what we're gonna try. Can I? How about? Can I read a story instead?
How long is the story?
It'll be very short.
Okay. This is exciting.
You're asking about the meaning of Om, and let me see if I can find it. Nope, it's not here. Okay, well, if you give me 1 second.
Yeah.
So Om. So oops. So some of one part of Zen is that there, you think we're always thinking all the time, always thinking, and always trying to like achieve something. And Zen sort of is like a short circuit. It like short circuits your brain sometimes, and it makes it hard to sometimes think about things on purpose. So I kind of want to read 2 stories, but I think I'm just
please.
So this is a very famous koan, which is like a question. A koan is sort of like kind of like a riddle, but not really a riddle, but also a little like a riddle, because you have to sort of unlock it, but you're not unlocking it with logic and rationality.
How do you spell Kwan?
Koan is K-O-A-N.
Look at my notes.
Yeah.
Homework.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
So this is called Joshu's dog. So a monk asked Joshu, a Chinese Zen master, has a dog Buddha nature or not? Because all living things have Buddha nature. So Joshu answered, mu. So mu is a negative symbol in Chinese, meaning no thing, or no, it doesn't. So how does a dog not have Buddha nature? How does that make sense? Why did he say mu? What is the meaning of that? So I'll leave you and your listeners with that question. Okay.
Comment below if you figure it out, people. Comment below. Thanks, Edon. And if people want a session with you, they can just find you on Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah, you can find me, not really Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. It's Edahn Small. You see the name in the Zoom thing here. Yeah, you can add me there. I do like 5 sessions free, and then there's sort of like there's like a kind of check-in at that point. So yeah, if people want some free sessions, it's happy to help.
That's so gracious. Wow. Does that bring you joy?
It does. I do enjoy it. Yeah. It's nice to be able to help people. If I can't do it full time right now, at least I do it part time.
It's amazing. I can't wait till it is full time, and it's like these retreats that you're, already knowing that that's what you want to do. That's really great. I think that's amazing. I see it.
Well, thank you for having me on your show or on
Thanks,
your
Boo.
thing.
Talk soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.